The massive doors of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber slid open with a sound like thunder rolling across distant mountains. Ambassador Marcus Reed stepped into the circular arena, his black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast against the prismatic walls that stretched impossibly high above him. The chamber could have housed Earth's largest stadium 50 times over. Yet every whisper, every alien breath carried with perfect clarity to his ears. Around him, in ascending tiers that seemed to reach toward infinity, sat the representatives of over 400 species. Some floated in anti-gravity fields, others rested on crystalline perches designed for their unique physiologies. The Zenthari delegation resembled massive jellyfish pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, while the insectoid Kravex clicked their mandibles in rhythmic disapproval. Reed had studied them all, memorized their cultures, their weaknesses, their fears. Today he would need every piece of that knowledge. At the chamber's apex, High Chancellor Vorth of the Centauri Collective presided over the assembly. His four eyes, each the size of Reed's fist, tracked the human's movement with predatory focus. The Chancellor's blue-scaled hide rippled with patterns that Reed recognized as signs of barely contained anger. Good. Angry beings made mistakes. Human. Chancellor Vorth's voice boomed through the chamber's acoustic amplifiers, each word carrying the weight of absolute authority. You stand before the combined might of galactic civilization. 400 species, 10,000 worlds, 1 trillion souls. Do you comprehend the insignificance of your position? Reed walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Every eye, sensor, and neural receptor focused on him. He could feel their collective judgment pressing down like a physical weight. The temperature regulators in his suit worked overtime to compensate for the stress sweat threatening to break through his diplomatic composure. I comprehend more than you realize, Chancellor, Reed replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. He stopped at the exact geometric center of the chamber, where a single spotlight illuminated a circle of polished metal. But perhaps we should discuss why humanity requested this emergency session. A ripple of surprise passed through the assembled delegates. Counselor Thale, the reptilian representative of the Vexen Empire, leaned forward in his crystalline chair. Requested? Your species violated 17 non-interference treaties. You expanded into protected systems without authorization. This is not a request, this is a trial. Reed smiled, an expression that seemed to unnerve several nearby delegates. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Humanity didn't come here to be judged. We came here to deliver a warning. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices. Screeches, clicks, harmonic vibrations, and subsonic growls created a wall of sound that the translation systems struggled to process. Through it all, Reed remained perfectly still, counting the seconds until Chancellor Vorth restored order. Silence. The Chancellor's roar cut through the chaos like a blade. Human, your arrogance knows no bounds. What possible warning could a species that achieved spaceflight mere centuries ago offer to civilizations that have ruled the stars for millennia? Reed reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small crystalline data core. The simple gesture caused dozens of security officers from various species to tense, their hands moving to weapons. This data core contains information gathered by Earth's deep space monitoring stations over the past 50 years. Information that suggests your mighty galactic civilization is about to face its greatest threat. Counselor Bex of the Tritonian hives chittered rapidly, her multiple arms gesticulating in patterns that conveyed extreme agitation. Her translator rendered her words in a mechanical voice. Impossible. Our sensor networks monitor every approach vector to Council space. No threat exists that we have not already cataloged and neutralized. Your sensor networks, Reed said quietly, are designed to detect known technologies, ships that use conventional faster-than-light travel, energy signatures that match established patterns. But what if the threat doesn't follow your rules? High Chancellor Vorth's four eyes narrowed simultaneously. Explain yourself, human, and choose your words carefully. The patience of this council is not infinite. Reed held up the data core, letting the chamber's lighting catch its faceted surface. 3 days ago, our monitoring station in the Tau Ceti system detected an energy signature unlike anything in your databases. The signature lasted exactly 43 seconds before vanishing completely. In those 43 seconds, the station recorded readings that should have been impossible. Impossible how? Counselor Ziana of the Helix Confederation asked, her crystalline voice tinkling like wind chimes. Despite her question, Reed noticed her bioluminescent patterns had shifted to configurations he recognized as expressions of deep concern. The reading suggested something was manipulating space-time itself, not traveling through it, not bending it for faster-than-light travel, but actually folding reality to create temporary doorways between dimensions. Reed paused, letting the implications sink in. Our scientists estimate that any civilization capable of such technology would view your most advanced warships as we might view stone axes. The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient humming from various life support systems seemed to fade as hundreds of alien minds processed this information. Reed could see fear beginning to replace anger in many of the delegates' expressions. Fear was useful. Fear made beings willing to listen. Chancellor Vorth's scales had shifted from blue to a deep purple that Reed's briefings had identified as a sign of extreme unease. Even if such readings existed, what concern is it of yours? Humanity has no stake in galactic affairs. You are newcomers, barely worthy of observer status. That's where you're wrong, Chancellor. Reed's voice carried a new edge, a hint of steel beneath the diplomatic courtesy. Humanity has a very significant stake in what's coming. You see, we've encountered this energy signature before. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Counselor Thale's forked tongue flicked out nervously. When? Where? Reed's smile vanished, replaced by an expression of grim determination. 200 years ago in our home galaxy, 3 months before something emerged from those dimensional doorways and destroyed every inhabited world within 1,000 light-years of Earth. The silence that followed was absolute. Reed could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, could feel the weight of 400 civilizations hanging on his next words. This was the moment everything depended on, the moment that would determine whether the galaxy would listen or dismiss him as a primitive liar. The entity we encountered, Reed continued, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, had a name for itself. It called itself the Devourer of Worlds, and according to our calculations, it should be arriving in this galaxy within the next 72 hours. High Chancellor Vorth's 4 eyes widened in recognition and growing horror. The Devourer? That's impossible. That's a myth from the ancient texts, a story told to frighten younglings. Tell that to the 16 billion humans who died trying to stop it, Reed said quietly. Tell that to the survivors who barely escaped in the last evacuation ships. Tell that to the civilizations in 3 other galaxies that sent warning signals before their transmissions went dark. Forever. The chamber remained, frozen in shocked silence as the implications crashed over the assembled delegates like a tidal wave of inevitability. The question now, Reed said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife, is whether you'll listen to what we learned about fighting it, or whether you'll spend the next 72 hours debating while your worlds burn. The holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, filling the vast space with a 3-dimensional map of the local galactic sector. Red warning indicators pulsed at 17 different locations along what appeared to be a perfectly coordinated pattern. The sight sent visible tremors through several of the more sensitive alien species. These are the emergence points we detected in our home galaxy, Reed explained, manipulating the display with practiced efficiency. The Devourer doesn't attack randomly. It follows a specific pattern, establishing beachheads at strategic points that allow it to cut off escape routes and supply lines. Counselor Thale's vertical pupils had dilated to thin slits. Even if we accept your claims about this Devourer, why should we trust the word of a species that has violated our sovereignty at every turn? Your colonies have ignored our laws, disrupted our trade routes, and established unauthorized mining operations. Reed nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this exact question. Those violations weren't random acts of expansion, Counselor. Every single human settlement was placed with mathematical precision. He gestured to the holographic display, and suddenly the locations of human colonies appeared as blue dots scattered across the galaxy. Notice anything about the pattern? The alien delegates leaned forward in their various seating arrangements, studying the display intently. It was Counselor Ziana who spoke first, her crystalline voice trembling with realization. The human settlements, they're positioned at every major hyperspace junction in the Outer Rim territories. Not just positioned, Reed corrected, fortified. Every human colony that you've accused of economic disruption has actually been a military installation in disguise. We've spent the last 50 years building the galaxy's first line of defense. High Chancellor Vorth's 4 eyes tracked between the display and Reed's unwavering gaze. You're claiming that humanity's entire expansion into council space has been a covert military operation? Not covert, necessary. Reed's tone carried the weight of grim experience. In our home galaxy, we tried the diplomatic approach first. We sent warnings to the established civilizations, showed them our evidence, pleaded with them to prepare. Do you know what happened? The chamber waited in tense silence. They spent 18 months debating the validity of our claims while the Devourer established its beachheads. By the time they accepted the threat was real, it was too late to mount an effective defense. Entire star systems fell while the Galactic Council argued about jurisdiction and resource allocation. Counselor Bex's translator crackled as she spoke rapidly in her native language. You expect us to believe that your entire species has been living a coordinated lie for half a century? Reed's expression softened slightly. Not a lie, a mission. When the last evacuation ships left Earth, they carried more than just refugees. They carried a mandate. Find the next target galaxy and make sure it doesn't fall the same way we did. The implications sent ripples of unease through the assembled delegates. Chancellor Vorth's scales had shifted to a deep crimson that Reed recognized as a sign of extreme agitation. The next target galaxy? You're suggesting this Devourer follows some kind of pattern. We've detected evidence of its passage through 14 different galaxies over the past millennium, Reed replied, calling up a new section of the holographic display. It systematically consumes all organic life in one galaxy before moving to the next. The process takes approximately 200 years from initial contact to complete consumption. The display showed a timeline that made several delegates physically recoil. Galaxy after galaxy reduced to empty husks, their stars still burning but their worlds stripped bare of any trace of life. The pattern was unmistakable and terrifying in its methodical precision. Our scientists believe the Devourer feeds on something more than just organic matter, Reed continued. It seems to consume the quantum resonance patterns that life creates. Without those patterns, even the most advanced technology becomes inert. Counselor Thale's voice was barely a whisper. How do you fight something like that? Reed's smile returned, but this time it held a different quality. Not diplomatic courtesy, but the grim satisfaction of someone who had found a solution to an impossible problem. You don't fight it directly. You make it so expensive to consume your galaxy that it moves on to easier prey. Explain, Chancellor Vorth demanded. The Devourer's greatest advantage is surprise. It establishes its beachheads before the local civilizations realize they're under attack. But what if those beachheads were already occupied? What if every strategic position in the galaxy was already fortified and ready for war? The holographic display shifted again, showing detailed schematics of human settlements. What had appeared to be simple mining operations and agricultural colonies revealed themselves as sophisticated fortress cities, their true nature hidden beneath layers of civilian infrastructure. Every human colony contains enough firepower to hold off a Devourer assault force for at least 6 months, Reed explained. More importantly, they're all connected by quantum communication networks that can't be intercepted or jammed by known technology. Counselor Ziana's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to configurations that Reed's briefings indicated were expressions of awe and fear. The mining operations that the Keth Consortium complained about. What were you really extracting? Quantum-stable metals. The only materials we've found that can withstand direct exposure to Devourer energy weapons. We've been refining and stockpiling them for 5 decades. Reed paused, letting the information sink in. We've also been secretly incorporating trace amounts into every piece of technology we've traded with Council species. The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. Dozens of delegates began rapid consultations with their advisors through neural links and communication devices. The scope of humanity's deception was staggering. You've been altering our technology without our knowledge? Counselor Thale's voice carried equal parts outrage and grudging admiration. The integration protocols alone would require the cooperation of every human scientist, engineer, and technician in the galaxy, Reed finished. When your species faces extinction, operational security becomes a survival trait. But it's not betrayal. Every modification we made strengthens your existing systems against the specific threats the Devourer represents. High Chancellor, Vorth studied the holographic evidence with the intensity of someone trying to find flaws in an unwelcome truth. Even assuming your preparations are as extensive as you claim, How do we know this devourer will actually appear? Your evidence consists of energy readings and ancient historical patterns. Reed's expression grew somber. Because, Chancellor, we've been tracking its approach for the past 10 years. Our deep space monitoring stations detected the first dimensional probes 18 months ago. The frequency and intensity have been increasing exponentially. A new display materialized, showing a series of temporal graphs that painted an increasingly urgent picture. The energy readings followed a clear progression that ended in a sharp spike just days away. Based on this pattern, Reed continued, the devourer will begin establishing its primary beachheads in exactly 71 hours and 36 minutes. The question isn't whether it's coming. The question is whether you'll trust the species that's spent 50 years preparing for this moment. The chamber fell into stunned silence as hundreds of alien minds grappled with the magnitude of what they had just learned. In the distance, the soft chiming of emergency communication systems began to echo through the council chambers as preliminary reports from the Rim territories started to arrive. Reports that would confirm everything Reed had just told them. The emergency chimes grew louder as a junior aide rushed into the chamber, his 6 legs carrying him rapidly across the polished floor to High Chancellor Vorth's elevated platform. The aide's whispered report caused the Chancellor's 4 eyes to widen in visible alarm. What is it? Counselor Thale demanded, his reptilian features twisted with growing anxiety. Chancellor Vorth's voice carried a tremor that hadn't been there moments before. Our rim sensor stations are reporting massive gravitational anomalies at coordinates that match. He paused, looking down at Reed with a mixture of dread and dawning realization. That match your predicted emergence points exactly. Reed nodded grimly. The preliminary probes. The devourer sends them through first to test dimensional stability and map local gravitational fields. We have approximately 68 hours before the main force arrives. The chamber erupted in panicked voices as delegates demanded immediate evacuation of their home worlds, deployment of military fleets, and activation of emergency protocols. Through the chaos, Reed stood perfectly still at the center of the chamber, waiting for the inevitable moment when they would realize the futility of conventional responses. Silence. Chancellor Vorth's roar cut through the noise. Human, if what you claim is true, why haven't our own military analysts detected these threats? We maintain the most sophisticated defense networks in galactic history. Reed manipulated the holographic display, bringing up a new series of technical readouts. Because the devourer learned from its encounters with previous galaxies. It specifically targets and neutralizes conventional sensor networks before beginning its main assault. The display showed detailed analysis of how the devourer's probes operated, using quantum interference patterns to blind traditional detection systems while gathering intelligence about local defenses. The technology was beyond anything the Council species had encountered. Our monitoring stations use a completely different approach, Reed continued. Instead of trying to detect the probes directly, we monitor the quantum wake they leave behind. It's like tracking a submarine by watching the disturbances it creates in the water. Counselor Bex chittered rapidly, her translator struggling to keep up with her agitated speech. Even if your detection methods are superior, what can anyone do against a force that consumed entire galaxies? Our combined fleets number in the hundreds of thousands of ships. Reed's smile was grim. In our home galaxy, we fielded over 1 million ships in the final battle. The devourer destroyed them in less than 6 hours. The statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates visibly withdrew into defensive postures, while others began rapid consultations with their military advisors. However, Reed continued, we learned something crucial during that battle. The devourer's forces aren't invincible. They can be damaged, even destroyed, if you know how to fight them. How? Chancellor Vorth leaned forward, his 4 eyes fixed on Reed with desperate intensity. Traditional energy weapons are useless. Kinetic weapons have limited effectiveness, but weapons that disrupt quantum coherence patterns can cause catastrophic failures in their technology. Reed gestured to the display, which showed footage from humanity's final battle. We managed to destroy 17 devourer ships before our fleet was overwhelmed. The footage was both inspiring and terrifying. Massive human vessels unleashed weapons that seemed to tear holes in space itself, causing enemy ships to simply cease existing. But for every devourer vessel destroyed, dozens of human ships were consumed by dark energy beams that left nothing behind. 17 ships. Counselor Ziana whispered. Out of how many? Several thousand in the immediate area, Reed admitted. But those 17 kills taught us everything we needed to know about building effective weapons. And you've built these weapons? Counselor Thale asked, his voice barely audible. Reed's expression became carefully neutral. Every human colony in this galaxy has been equipped with quantum disruption arrays, powerful enough to destroy Devourer capital ships. But more importantly, we've discovered that the key to survival isn't winning a single battle. It's making the conquest too costly to be worth completing. The holographic display shifted to show tactical projections of how a coordinated defense might unfold. Instead of massive fleet engagements, the plan called for a network of fortified positions that could inflict continuous damage on Devourer forces while they attempted to establish their beachheads. The Devourer operates on a cost-benefit analysis, Reed explained. If a galaxy can be consumed quickly and efficiently, it proceeds. But if the resistance is too fierce and the loss is too heavy, it withdraws to seek easier prey elsewhere. Chancellor Vorth studied the tactical projections with the intensity of someone trying to find hope in a desperate situation. These defensive positions, they would require the cooperation of every major civilization in the galaxy. The logistics alone would be staggering. Which brings us to the real purpose of this meeting, Reed said quietly. Humanity has spent 50 years preparing for this moment. We've built the weapons, established the defensive positions, and created the communication networks necessary for a coordinated response. But we can't do it alone. What exactly are you asking of us? Counselor Thale's voice carried a mixture of suspicion and growing desperation. Reed straightened, adopting the formal posture of a diplomat delivering an official ultimatum. In 67 hours, every human installation in the galaxy will activate its defensive systems. With or without Council approval, we will engage the Devourer forces as they emerge. The question is whether you'll coordinate with us or leave your worlds to face the assault alone. The chamber fell silent, except for the increasingly urgent emergency chimes echoing from the Rim territories. More aides rushed in with reports, each one confirming another aspect of Reed's predictions. The pattern was becoming undeniable. You're asking us to trust our civilization's survival to a species we barely know, Counselor Beck said through her translator. How do we know you won't use these weapons against us after the threat has passed? Reed's laugh was bitter. Counselor, if we fail to stop the Devourer, there won't be anyone left to threaten. And if we succeed— He paused, his expression growing distant. Humanity's only goal is to ensure that some trace of galactic civilization survives. We've already lost one galaxy to this enemy. We won't lose another. But what guarantee do we have that you'll relinquish control once the crisis passes? Chancellor Vorth pressed. None, Reed admitted with startling honesty. But consider this. We could have activated our defensive networks without warning you. We could have let you discover the threat on your own, after it was too late to mount an effective response. Instead, we're offering you the chance to coordinate a united defense. The implications hung heavy in the chamber's recycled atmosphere. Reed was essentially admitting that humanity had already achieved a position of overwhelming military advantage throughout the galaxy, but was offering to use it in service of a common defense rather than conquest. How long do we have to decide? Chancellor Vorth asked finally. Reed checked his chronometer with practiced calm. The first major emergence is predicted to occur in the Altair system in exactly 66 hours and 14 minutes. If you're going to coordinate with our defensive plan, we need your answer in the next 12 hours. As if summoned by his words, another aide rushed into the chamber with a report that caused Chancellor Vorth's scales to shift to deep purple with alarm. What is it now? Counselor Thale demanded. Chancellor Vorth's voice was hollow as he spoke. Long-range sensors in the Altair system have just detected massive spatial distortions. Something is preparing to emerge from dimensional space. Reed's expression remained carefully controlled, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the data core in his hand. Then we have less time than I calculated. The question now is whether you'll face this threat as allies or as separate civilizations standing alone against the dark. The emergency chimes had become a constant wailing that seemed to echo the growing desperation of an entire galaxy suddenly confronted with its own mortality. The emergency session had been going for 6 hours. Delegates who normally required different atmospheric conditions found themselves sharing the same space as life support systems, worked overtime to accommodate dozens of alien physiologies. The stress was visible in every corner of the chamber. Centauri delegation's bioluminescence had dimmed to almost nothing. The Kraveks were clicking their mandibles in agitated rhythms, and even the usually composed Helix Confederation representatives showed signs of strain in their crystalline structures. High Chancellor Vorth had aged visibly in those 6 hours. His blue scales had taken on a grayish tinge that Reed recognized as a sign of extreme fatigue in Centauri physiology. Ambassador Reed, we've reviewed your tactical projections, your defensive plans, and your evidence about this devourer entity. The Council needs to understand one crucial point. What happens if we refuse your proposal? Reed stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time sensor feeds from across the galaxy. The data was increasingly grim. If you refuse, Chancellor, then in approximately 60 hours the Devourer will establish beachheads in 17 star systems simultaneously. Your military forces will respond according to standard protocols, treating each emergence as a separate threat. He manipulated the display to show tactical simulations of conventional responses to the attacks. Your fleets will engage with energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, which will have minimal effect. Within 12 hours, the Devourer forces will have eliminated your forward elements and begun establishing dimensional gateways for their main invasion. Force, the projections showed the inexorable spread of dark zones across the galactic map as Devourer forces consumed system after system. The timeline was horrifying in its efficiency. Within 30 days, they will have secured a foothold that makes their eventual victory inevitable. Reed continued, your remaining civilizations will have perhaps 6 months before the galaxy is completely consumed. Counselor Thales' voice carried a tremor of barely controlled panic. And with your cooperation? What then? Reed's expression grew determined. With coordinated resistance using quantum disruption weapons, we estimate we can destroy approximately 30% of their initial invasion force. More importantly, we can deny them their preferred beachheads and force them into a prolonged siege scenario. 30%, Counselor Bex repeated through her translator, still leaves 70% of their forces intact. Yes, but those 70% will be forced to operate without secure supply lines or dimensional gateways. The Devourer's strategy depends on rapid establishment of forward bases. Deny them that, and their forces become vulnerable to attrition warfare. Reed called up a new projection showing the difference between the two scenarios. With coordination, the dark zone spread much more slowly, allowing time for evacuations, regrouping, and counterattacks. Our projections suggest that a coordinated defense could extend resistance from months to decades. And decades gives us time to develop new weapons, new tactics. Chancellor Vorth leaned back in his throne, 4 eyes studying the competing projections. You're asking us to abandon our independence and place our entire military under human coordination for what might be decades of warfare. I'm asking you to survive, Reed replied simply. Independence means nothing if your species goes extinct. The chamber fell silent except for the continuing emergency alerts. Another aide appeared with the latest reports from the Rim territories. The gravitational anomalies were intensifying, and several monitoring stations had gone dark without explanation. There's something else you need to know, Reed said, after the aide departed. Our deep space monitoring has detected similar energy patterns in 3 other galaxies. The Devourer isn't just targeting us. This appears to be part of a larger expansion cycle. The implication sent visible shudders through the assembled delegates. Counselor Ziana's crystalline voice was barely audible. You're suggesting this entity is consuming multiple galaxies simultaneously? We believe it operates on multiple dimensional levels, Reed confirmed. What we're facing may only be a fragment of its full attention, but even a fragment is enough to destroy everything we know. Counselor Thale stood abruptly, his reptilian features twisted with anguish. This is madness. We're being asked to choose between certain subjugation and probable extinction. No, Reed said firmly. You're being asked to choose between cooperation and annihilation. There's a difference. Is there? Chancellor Vorth's 4 eyes fixed on Reed with laser intensity. Once we integrate our systems with your defensive networks, what prevents humanity from using that access to control our civilizations permanently? Reed was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of profound loss. Because we've already lived through the alternative, Chancellor. We've watched our home galaxy burn while we debated politics and worried about sovereignty. We've seen what happens when pride becomes more important than survival. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed images from humanity's final evacuation from their home galaxy. Massive ships fleeing a spreading wave of darkness that consumed everything in its path. Every human in this galaxy is a refugee. Every human settlement is built on the graves of worlds we couldn't save. We didn't come here to conquer. We came here to prevent the same tragedy from happening again. The emotional weight of his words seemed to settle over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Several delegates who had been most vocal in their opposition fell silent, studying the images of fleeing refugee ships with new understanding. But even if we accept your proposal, Counselor Beck said finally, how do we know your defenses will be sufficient? You admitted that your own galaxy was lost despite similar preparations. Reed's smile was grim, because this time we know what we're fighting. In our home galaxy, the first attacks came as a complete surprise. We had no warning, no preparation, no understanding of the enemy's capabilities. Here, we've had 50 years to prepare specifically for this threat. 50 years to prepare for something that hasn't happened yet, Counselor Thale pointed out. How can you be certain your assumptions are correct? Before Reed could answer, the chamber's primary alarm system activated for the first time in the Council's history. The wailing sound was designed to be audible to every species in the chamber, creating a cacophony of terror that sent several delegates into protective postures. Chancellor Vorth's aide rushed to his platform with visible panic. After a hurried consultation, the Chancellor's voice boomed across the chamber. The Altair System Monitoring Station has just transmitted its final message. Something massive has emerged from dimensional space and is consuming the star itself. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates screamed in their native languages, demanding immediate evacuation of their home systems. Through it all, Reed remained perfectly still, his expression grim but unsurprised. Chancellor, Reed called over the chaos, his voice somehow carrying clearly despite the noise. The emergence at Altair was 17 hours ahead of our most aggressive projections. If the Devourer has accelerated its timeline, we may have as little as 48 hours before the main assault begins. The revelation cut through the panic like a knife. Chancellor Vorth struggled to restore order as the reality of their situation sank in. 48 hours? That's not enough time to coordinate a galaxy-wide defense. Reed reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a second data core, this one pulsing with active quantum patterns. Actually, Chancellor, it is. Because humanity has been preparing for this moment for 5 decades. Our defensive networks are already in place and ready for activation. The only question is whether you'll coordinate with us or face the assault alone. As if summoned by his words, every display in the chamber activated simultaneously, showing real-time status reports from human installations across the galaxy. Hundreds of defensive positions, each one armed and ready for immediate activation. The choice is yours, Reed said quietly. But you have approximately 15 minutes to decide before we begin. Activating our systems with or without Council approval. The weight of an entire galaxy's survival settled on the chamber as hundreds of civilizations prepared to make the most important decision in their history. The silence stretched for exactly 93 seconds before High Chancellor Vorth spoke, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that would echo through galactic history. Show us everything. Every installation, every weapon, every plan. If we're going to trust our survival to humanity, we need to understand exactly what we're agreeing to. Reed nodded and activated the quantum cores he had carried into the chamber. The holographic display expanded to fill the entire space, creating a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy that revealed the true scope of humanity's preparations. What appeared were not the few dozen settlements the Council had been monitoring, but a network of over 3,000 fortified positions spanning every major star system. By all the ancient stars, Counselor Ziana whispered, her crystalline structure resonating with harmonics that spoke of awe and terror. You've militarized the entire galaxy. We've prepared the entire galaxy, Reed corrected. Every trade route, every mining operation, every diplomatic mission for the past 50 years has been part of a coordinated effort to create an integrated defense network. The display showed the intricate connections between human installations and existing infrastructure. Reed manipulated the controls to highlight how human technology had been gradually integrated into Council systems through seemingly routine maintenance and upgrades. The quantum stabilizers we installed in your hyperspace beacons. They double as communication relays for our command network. The improved power cells we provided for your defense platforms, they contain quantum disruption emitters. The software updates we've been providing to your ship systems, they include targeting algorithms specifically designed for Devourer vessels. Counselor Thale's vertical pupils had contracted to thin lines. You've been subverting our technology for half a century. This is invasion by stealth. This is survival by necessity, Reed replied firmly. Every modification we made strengthens your existing systems. But more importantly, it creates a unified defense network that can respond faster than any traditional command structure. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's emergency systems activated with even greater intensity. Multiple aides rushed in carrying reports that caused visible alarm among the council members. Chancellor Vorth's four eyes widened as he processed the information. 3 more emergence events have been detected. The Vega system, Proxima Centauri, and... He paused, his voice breaking slightly. And the Sol system. Reed's carefully maintained composure cracked for the first time since entering the chamber. Sol? They're attacking Earth directly? The monitoring station there reported massive dimensional distortions before going silent, Chancellor Vorth confirmed. Whatever this devourer is, it appears to be targeting humanity's home system specifically. Reed closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, his expression had hardened into something that made several delegates physically recoil. Then they've made a mistake. A very large mistake. He touched his neural interface, and suddenly every human installation in the galaxy came online simultaneously. The display showed defensive positions activating in perfect coordination, their quantum disruption arrays powering up with mathematical precision. "What are you doing?" Counselor Bex demanded through her translator. "What we should have done 50 years ago," Reed replied grimly, "taking the fight to them." The display shifted to show real-time footage from the Sol system, where something impossible was taking place. Instead of the consuming darkness that had characterized Devourer attacks in other galaxies, the space around Earth was filled with brilliant flashes of quantum fire as hidden defensive platforms engaged the invading forces. Earth was never abandoned, Reed explained as the Council watched in stunned silence. The refugees who fled the Milky Way were actually advanced scouts and military specialists. Earth has been rebuilt as the most heavily fortified world in galactic history. The footage showed Devourer ships being systematically destroyed by weapons that seemed to tear holes in reality itself. For the first time in any recorded encounter, the alien invaders were being driven back. "How many humans are actually in this galaxy?" Chancellor Vorth asked, his voice barely audible. "Including Earth's population? Approximately 40 billion. Every single one of them has been preparing for this moment since childhood." Reed's voice carried grim pride. "We didn't come here as refugees. We came here as liberators." The implications crashed over the council like a tidal wave. Counselor Thale stood abruptly, his scales flushed with anger. "Liberators from what? We were never under threat until you led these devourers here." Reed turned to face him directly, and his expression contained enough steel to cut diamond. "The devourers have been consuming galaxies for over 10 million years. They would have found this galaxy eventually. The only difference is that now, for the first time in recorded history, a galaxy will be ready for them." The display showed tactical updates from across the galaxy as human defensive positions engaged emerging devourer forces. The pattern was clear. Wherever the invaders appeared, they met coordinated resistance using weapons specifically designed to counter their technology. "We learned something crucial during our last evacuation," Reed continued. "The devourers don't just consume civilizations. They study them. They learn from each conquest and become more efficient. But they've never faced a civilization that studied them back." Counselor Ziana's harmonics had shifted to patterns Reed recognized as expressions of dawning understanding. "You're not just defending this galaxy. You're using it as a trap." Reed's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Every human settlement, every defensive position, every weapon we've built serves a dual purpose. Defense, yes, but more importantly, intelligence gathering. We're recording every tactic they use, every weakness we can exploit, every limitation of their technology." The display shifted to show data streams flowing from battle zones back to central processing centers hidden throughout human space. The scope of the intelligence operation was staggering. "This galaxy isn't just our new home," Reed explained. "It's our laboratory, and the devourers just walked into the most comprehensive study of their capabilities that any civilization has ever attempted." Chancellor Vorth's voice was hollow, as the full scope of humanity's plan became clear. You're willing to sacrifice entire star systems for research data. We're willing to sacrifice anything necessary to ensure that the next galaxy they target will be even better prepared than we are. Reed replied without hesitation. The cycle of consumption has to end somewhere. It ends here. The emergency alert suddenly changed tone, shifting from panic to something approaching hope. Reports began flooding in of successful defensive actions, of devourer forces being not just engaged but actively driven back from multiple systems. The quantum disruption fields are working beyond our most optimistic projections, Reed reported, monitoring the incoming data streams. Devourer casualties are running at 67% higher than our models predicted. And our casualties? Counselor Thale asked. Reed's expression became grim, significant, but acceptable within operational parameters. The cold calculation in his voice sent chills through the assembled delegates. They were witnessing something unprecedented, a species that had learned to wage war on a galactic scale with the same methodical precision that others applied to scientific research. How long before we know if your plan has succeeded? Chancellor Vorth asked. Reed checked his chronometer and the incoming tactical reports before answering. The Devourer will attempt to establish dimensional gateways for their main force over the next 48 hours. If we can prevent that establishment, they'll be forced to withdraw and seek easier prey elsewhere. And if they adapt to your weapons faster than you anticipated? Reed's smile was grim. Then we activate the final protocol and demonstrate why humanity never leaves without a purpose. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. As if summoned by his words, a new alert chimed through the chamber. The display showed something that made even Reed pause in surprise. The Devourer forces were beginning to withdraw from several systems, their dimensional portals collapsing as they retreated into whatever space between realities they called home. They're retreating, Chancellor Vorth said in disbelief. After all these eons of conquest, they're actually retreating. Reed's expression carried the weight of a species that had finally found redemption for the worlds they couldn't save. No, Chancellor. They're learning. And that's exactly what we wanted them to do. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Devourers completed their withdrawal, leaving behind only the wreckage of their failed invasion and a civilized galaxy that had learned the most important lesson in cosmic history. Sometimes salvation comes from the species willing to make the hardest choices. Humanity had kept its promise. They never left without a purpose.